I was once a top pre-med student with a full scholarship, and my future looked bright. My family seemed supportive of my dreams until my cousin Jessica came to visit that fateful weekend. In just 24 hours, my life shattered when she falsely accused me of sexual assault. Without even giving me a chance to explain, my parents believed her instantly. I can still feel the sting of my father's fist and hear my mother's cruel words as they threw me out with nothing but the clothes on my back. Before I tell you how my own parents destroyed my life and how I confronted them 7 years later, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories of betrayal and redemption. I never thought my life would fall apart so quickly. At 21, I was at the top of my class at one of the most prestigious universities in the country, maintaining a nearly perfect 3.95 GPA that made my professors proud. My hard work had already secured me a full-ride scholarship to medical school the following year, an achievement that only a handful of students in the nation could claim. Most of my classmates were drowning in student debt, but I had managed to keep my finances in order through academic excellence. My research project on neurological responses to trauma was gaining national attention, with 2 medical journals expressing interest in publishing my findings. I was driven by a personal mission to become a neurosurgeon after watching my grandmother suffer and eventually pass away from a brain tumor when I was 15. Her death had given me purpose, and I channeled my grief into a relentless pursuit of medical knowledge. Professor Williams, the head of the pre-med department, had personally taken me under his wing. Just a week before the incident, he had called me into his office. "Dimitri, I have been teaching for 30 years, and I rarely see students with your combination of intellect and compassion," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The medical field needs more doctors like you will become." I remember feeling both proud and humbled by his words, not knowing that within days everything would be taken away from me. I grew up in a middle-class suburb outside of Boston in a brick house, with carefully maintained flower beds that my mother tended every weekend. My father, Richard, was the principal of the local high school, known throughout the community for his strict disciplinary approach. At home, he applied the same rigid standards to me, measuring my worth through achievements and obedience rather than unconditional love. My mother, Kathleen, was deeply involved in community volunteer work and was a leader in our local church. She was a people-pleaser to her core, always concerned about appearances and what others might think. Their love came with conditions that I constantly worked to fulfill, walking a tightrope of expectations that grew narrower with each passing year. I was an only child, which meant all their expectations landed squarely on my shoulders. The pressure was immense, but had become so normal that I rarely questioned it. Looking back, I see how their constant demands for excellence had shaped me, making me both resilient and vulnerable in ways I did not yet understand. The extended family dynamics were complicated. My father came from a large family with 4 siblings, and there had always been an undercurrent of competition among the cousins. My academic success had created tension, particularly with my Aunt Linda and her daughter Jessica, who struggled in school and had been in trouble with the law for shoplifting and vandalism. Jessica was 3 years younger than me, and had a history of fabricating stories for attention. When we were children, she once claimed I had pushed her down the stairs, when in reality she had tripped while running. Another time, she told everyone at a family gathering that I had stolen money from her backpack. The truth eventually came out both times, but my aunt always defended her, claiming Jessica was sensitive and misunderstood. As we grew older, her jealousy became more obvious. While I received congratulations for academic achievements, Jessica would roll her eyes or make cutting remarks just loud enough for me to hear. My parents always insisted I be the bigger person and ignore her behavior, which only seemed to encourage her. That fateful weekend, Jessica came to stay with us while attending a college fair nearby. She was a senior in high school and struggling to find direction. My parents suggested I help her navigate the fair since I had been so successful in my college applications. I agreed, though reluctantly. The tension started the first night when I returned from the library to find Jessica going through my desk drawers. She jumped when I entered the room, quickly shutting the drawer she had been rifling through. "What are you doing?" I asked, setting down my backpack. "Just looking for a pen," she replied with a shrug, though I could see my private journal partially sticking out from under her sleeve. "That drawer has my personal stuff," I said firmly. "There are pens in the kitchen if you need one." "God, you are so uptight," she snapped, pushing past me to leave the room. "No wonder you do not have a girlfriend." I let it go, not wanting to create drama while she was staying with us. Later that night I secured my journal and other personal items in my lockbox, not trusting her to respect my privacy. It seemed like a minor issue at the time, not the precursor to the destruction of my life as I knew it. The next morning I woke up to raised voices downstairs. Still groggy from a late night of studying, I made my way to the kitchen, expecting perhaps an argument about breakfast or the day's plans. Instead, I walked into a scene that would forever change my life. Jessica sat at our kitchen table, tears streaming down her face as my parents stood protectively on either side of her. The moment they saw me, their expressions transformed into something I had never seen before, a mixture of disgust and rage that made my blood run cold. Before I could even ask what was happening, Jessica launched into a detailed, seemingly rehearsed story about how I had come into the guest room in the middle of the night and sexually assaulted her. As she spoke, adding specific details that made no sense but sounded convincing, I felt the floor disappearing beneath my feet. "That is absolutely not true," I finally managed to say when she finished, my voice shaking with shock. "I was studying until 2 a.m. and then went straight to bed. I never went near the guest room." My father raised his hand to silence me. "We do not want to hear your lies," he said, his voice ice cold. "Jessica has no reason to make this up." "But she does," I protested desperately. "She has always been jealous, you know that. She was going through my things yesterday and I caught her." "How dare you try to blame the victim?" my mother hissed, wrapping her arm tighter around Jessica. "This is exactly what predators do." I could not believe what was happening. These were the people who had raised me, who should have known my character better than anyone. Yet they had already convicted me without a single question, without a moment of doubt. "You need to listen to me," I pleaded, trying to make eye contact with my father. "This did not happen. I would never do something like that. Please just think about this logically." What happened next still haunts my nightmares. My father, the man who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my science projects, lunged across the kitchen and struck me with his closed fist. The blow caught me on the jaw, sending me staggering backward until I hit the wall. Before I could recover, he grabbed the front of my shirt and slammed me against the wall again. "You disgusting piece of garbage," he spat in my face. "We raised you better than this." My mother made no move to stop him. Instead, she joined in with words that cut deeper than any physical blow. "You are dead to us," she said, her voice eerily calm. "No son of mine would do something so vile." They called me names I cannot bring myself to repeat each word, stripping away another layer of the identity I had built as their son. Jessica watched the scene unfold, her initial fake tears now replaced with an almost satisfied expression that only I could see from my position against the wall. "Get out of our house," my father finally said, releasing his grip on my shirt. "Take nothing but the clothes on your back. You deserve nothing from us." I tried one more time to defend myself, but my father grabbed me by the arm and physically dragged me to the front door. Our neighbors across the street were working in their yard and stopped to stare as my father threw me onto the front lawn. My mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed as if guarding the threshold against contamination. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed through my body. I heard the lock click. And just like that, I was homeless, disowned, and branded as something I was not. I stood there for several minutes, unable to process what had just happened. My face throbbing from my father's blow, and my heart shattered beyond recognition. The first few hours after being thrown out passed in a blur of shock and disbelief. I wandered the streets of our neighborhood, avoiding eye contact with anyone who might recognize me, afraid that news of Jessica's accusations had already spread. My phone had been in my room along with my wallet ID and every possession that defined my existence. With nothing but the sweatpants and t-shirt I had slept in, I was suddenly invisible and untethered. The physical pain from my father's assault was nothing compared to the emotional trauma of being so completely betrayed by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Each step I took away from the only home I had ever known felt like walking further into an abyss with no bottom in sight. As night approached, The reality of my situation became more dire. Where would I sleep? How would I eat? Without my ID or money. I could not even check into a cheap motel. The temperature dropped and I found myself shivering in my thin clothing, eventually making my way to campus where I knew the library stayed open all night. For 3 nights, I slept in different corners of the university library, washing up in the bathroom and surviving on vending machine snacks purchased with loose change I found or borrowed from strangers. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy attending classes during the day, though I had no books or materials to take notes. My professors noticed something was wrong, but I was too ashamed to explain what had happened. On the 4th day, I ran into my friend Marcus coming out of biochemistry class. He took one look at my unwashed appearance and the dark circles under my eyes and pulled me aside. "Dude, what is going on with you? You look like you have been sleeping rough," he said, genuine concern in his voice. The dam broke and I told him everything through choked sobs. To his credit, Marcus never questioned my innocence, offering his couch without hesitation. "Stay as long as you need," he said, handing me a spare key to his apartment. But even this temporary relief was short-lived. Within a week, rumors about Jessica's accusations had spread across campus. The university initiated an investigation based on community concern despite Jessica not even being a student there. Without my academic records or the character references locked in my parents' house, I was at a severe disadvantage. The scholarship committee caught wind of the investigation and summoned me for a meeting. Despite my passionate defense and lack of any evidence against me, they decided to temporarily suspend my scholarship pending the outcome of the university's investigation. Their faces showed they had already made up their minds. "This is merely a precautionary measure," the committee chair said, not meeting my eyes. "We have a responsibility to other students and our institution's reputation." That single decision began the collapse of my academic career. Without the scholarship, I could not afford tuition. Without tuition, I could not attend classes. Without classes, my student status was in jeopardy. Each domino fell in rapid succession, despite my desperate attempts to stop the cascade. I tried to meet with the dean to plead my case, but was told he was unavailable indefinitely for my specific issue. Professors who had once praised my work now avoided eye contact in hallways. The research position I had worked so hard for was given to another student because I had personal issues interfering with my commitment. Within a month, I was forced to withdraw from the university. My dream of becoming a doctor, of honoring my grandmother's memory through healing others, evaporated like morning dew under the harsh sun of false accusations. The months that followed were the darkest of my life. Marcus could only let me stay for so long before his roommates complained about the extra person in their small apartment. I bounced between couches of increasingly distant acquaintances until even those options ran out. One particularly cold night in November, I found myself sitting on the edge of a bridge over the Charles River, contemplating whether the world would be better off without me in it. The water below looked almost peaceful, promising an end to the constant pain and rejection I had been experiencing. "That water is colder than it looks, son," a gruff voice said from behind me. I turned to find an older man with weathered features and a military surplus coat watching me with knowing eyes. He introduced himself as Ray, a homeless veteran who recognized the look of someone at the end of their rope. He shared his meager dinner of canned beans with me and told me about surviving 3 tours in Afghanistan only to lose everything to PTSD and a system that forgot him. "You are too young to give up," Ray said as we huddled under a bridge for warmth. "Whatever happened, you can rebuild. I am too old and broken, but you still got time." Those simple words from a stranger gave me the will to keep fighting. The next day, I applied for a dishwashing job at a 24-hour diner called Blue Plate Special. The manager, an overworked woman named Denise, barely glanced at my lack of ID before hiring me off the books for minimum wage and 1 meal per shift. I worked 14-hour days with my hands submerged in scalding water and harsh chemicals, returning to a shared room in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Boston, where I paid weekly rent to a landlord who asked no questions as long as cash was on time. The room had a mattress on the floor, a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, and cockroaches that scattered when I turned on the light. It was a far cry from my middle-class upbringing, but it was all I could afford. I tried reaching out to extended family members, hoping someone would hear my side of the story, but my parents had been thorough in their character assassination. Calls went unanswered, and the few that did connect ended quickly with uncomfortable excuses. I learned that my parents had told everyone that I had admitted guilt and was now facing the consequences of my actions. The lie was so complete that no one questioned it. The turning point came 6 months into my job at the diner, when the owner, Samuel, caught me reading a discarded medical textbook during my break. Instead of reprimanding me for not cleaning something, he pulled up a chair. "You do not strike me as a career dishwasher," he said bluntly, eyeing the advanced medical terminology on the page. "What is your story?" Something about his direct approach broke through my defensive walls, and I told him everything. Unlike others, who had heard versions of my story, Samuel listened without judgment, asking occasional clarifying questions, but otherwise letting me speak uninterrupted. When I finished, he nodded thoughtfully. "My assistant manager just quit. The job is yours if you want it. Better pay regular hours, and you can use the office computer to get your GED equivalency if you need it." Though I had completed high school and some college without access to my records, starting over seemed like the only path forward. Samuel's offer was the first kindness I had been shown in months that went beyond basic survival needs. Working as the assistant manager gave me stable income and a sense of purpose. I found affordable night classes at a community college and began rebuilding my education, switching from medicine to business administration. The dream of becoming a doctor seemed impossible now, without references or my previous academic record, but I could still make something of myself in another field. The free clinic in our neighborhood offered therapy sessions on a sliding scale, and I began the long process of addressing the trauma of my family's betrayal. Dr. Jennings helped me understand that I had developed PTSD from the sudden violence and abandonment, giving me coping strategies for the nightmares and panic attacks that plagued me. "What your family did was a form of psychological violence," she explained during one session. "Your reaction is normal considering the circumstances. Recovery will take time, but it is possible." Small victories began to accumulate. I opened a bank account with my new paycheck. I moved to a slightly better apartment with fewer cockroaches. I completed courses with high grades, rebuilding my academic confidence one assignment at a time. Each step forward was hard-won, but I was determined not to let my parents' betrayal define the rest of my life. 2 years after being thrown out, I made the decision to leave Boston entirely. Too many shadows lingered there. Too many painful associations around every corner. Chicago offered the anonymity of a big city with more affordable living costs and a robust job market. With Samuel's glowing recommendation, the only honest reference I had, I landed an entry-level position at a small consulting firm called Madison Partners. The fresh start was exactly what I needed. Without the weight of rumors and sideways glances, I could focus entirely on proving myself through hard work and dedication. I put in longer hours than anyone else, arrived first, and left last, volunteered for the projects no one wanted, and delivered results that could not be ignored. 6 months in, I caught the attention of Jamal Washington, one of the senior partners, after presenting an innovative approach to a client's supply chain problem. He began inviting me to sit in on higher-level meetings, offering guidance and constructive criticism that helped me refine my business instincts. "You have a unique perspective," Jamal told me after I successfully landed a major client. "You see angles others miss because you have experienced both privilege and its sudden loss. That is rare in this industry." Slowly, I built a new circle of friends who knew nothing about my past. Weekly basketball games with coworkers, occasional drinks after successful projects, movie nights with neighbors in my building. These casual connections gradually deepened into genuine friendships, teaching me that trust was still possible despite what I had endured. The most challenging step was opening myself to romantic possibilities. The fear of being vulnerable, of being betrayed again, had kept me isolated emotionally even as my professional life flourished. When Eliza from the marketing department asked me out for coffee, my initial instinct was to decline. "Just coffee," she said, with a warm smile that somehow bypassed my defenses. "No pressure, no expectations. That coffee led to dinner, which led to more conversations about everything except my past. Eliza noticed my reluctance to discuss family, but never pushed, showing remarkable patience as I slowly revealed pieces of myself at my own pace. Her kindness and genuine interest healed parts of me I thought permanently broken. After a year in Chicago, I received a promotion to senior consultant, following a project that saved a manufacturing client millions in operational costs. The accompanying salary increase allowed me to purchase a small but modern apartment in a secure building, the first place that truly felt like mine since leaving my parents' home. The day I signed the mortgage papers, I sat alone in my empty new living room and wept, overwhelmed by how far I had come from that desperate night on the bridge. The tears were both for what I had lost and what I had managed to build from the ashes of that loss. I was creating a new identity based not on family connections or academic achievements, but on proven integrity and resilience. I never spoke of my family to anyone except my therapist, but I carried the invisible scars of their betrayal in everything I did. The drive to prove myself worthy, the constant fear that everything could be taken away again without warning, the careful way I documented all interactions to protect myself from false accusations. These were the lasting effects of that single weekend that had altered the trajectory of my life. 7 years had passed since that fateful day when my parents threw me out. I was 31 now, with a life I had built entirely on my own terms. My position as division lead at one of Chicago's top consulting firms afforded me both financial security and professional respect. The scared homeless young man sleeping in library corners seemed like a different person, entirely a ghost from someone else's past. The Tuesday it happened was completely ordinary. I had finished an intense workout at my gym and was walking the 3 blocks to my apartment, mentally reviewing a presentation for the following day. The spring air felt good against my skin, carrying the promise of warmer days ahead after Chicago's brutal winter. I almost did not see them at first, 2 figures standing awkwardly by the entrance to my building. Something about their posture caught my attention, the way they were simultaneously trying to appear casual while anxiously scanning each approaching pedestrian. When recognition hit, it felt like being submerged in ice water. My father had aged dramatically, his once dark hair now completely gray, deep lines carving paths from his nose to his mouth. My mother looked smaller somehow, her shoulders hunched forward as if carrying an invisible weight. They both wore expressions of desperate hope that transformed into shock when they saw me approaching. My body reacted before my mind could process what was happening. My stomach lurched violently, and I felt the cold sweat of a panic attack beginning to form along my hairline. My vision tunneled briefly, and I had to remind myself to breathe through the techniques my therapist had taught me. "Dimitri," my mother said, taking a hesitant step forward. Her voice sounded exactly the same, triggering a cascade of memories I had worked years to suppress. "How did you find me?" I managed to ask, my voice steadier than I felt. "Your old friend Marcus," my father replied, looking uncomfortable in his casual clothing. I had only ever seen him in button-down shirts and ties. "We have been looking for a long time." The surge of betrayal toward Marcus was immediate, but quickly tempered by reason. He likely thought he was helping, unaware of the depth of trauma his well-intended action had caused. "What do you want?" I asked, maintaining distance between us. I noticed several neighbors watching the interaction with curious expressions. The last thing I wanted was to create a scene in front of my building. "Could we talk somewhere?" my mother asked, her eyes taking in my appearance with obvious surprise. I realized she had expected to find me struggling, not the successful professional standing before her in expensive workout clothes. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet them at a cafe around the corner, unwilling to have them anywhere near my personal space. The walk was silent and tense, none of us knowing how to navigate this unexpected reunion. Once seated with coffee that no one touched, my mother broke the silence. "Jessica confessed," she said, tears immediately filling her eyes. "She admitted she made everything up." I felt nothing at this revelation. No vindication, no relief, certainly no forgiveness. The damage had been done years ago, and this belated truth changed nothing about the path my life had taken. When I asked flatly, "About 6 months ago," my father replied, looking down at his untouched coffee. "She has been in therapy for substance abuse issues, and apparently coming clean about this was part of her recovery process. My mother reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand when she saw me flinch. "There was a terrible miscommunication," she said, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "We thought we were protecting someone vulnerable, and we made a horrible mistake." A miscommunication. I repeated the inadequacy of the word, nearly causing me to laugh. "Is that what you call physically assaulting your son and throwing him onto the street with nothing?" My father shifted uncomfortably. "I believed I was doing what was right at the time," he said, the non-apology hanging in the air between us. "We all did things we regret that day. We all did things," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "What exactly did I do except try to defend myself against a false accusation?" Neither of them had an answer for that. My mother wiped her tears and tried a different approach. "Jessica has been suffering terribly with guilt. She wants to apologize to you in person. That is partly why we are here." And there it was, the real reason for tracking me down after 7 years. Not concern for me, not genuine remorse for their actions, but to ease Jessica's conscience, and by extension, their own. "She needs to move on from this," my father added. "She has been stuck in a cycle of guilt and self-destruction. Meeting with you would help her heal." I looked at them, both truly looked at them, and saw what I had been unable to see as a child, completely in their thrall. They were fundamentally selfish people, incapable of seeing beyond their immediate circle of concern. 7 years without their son, and they had no questions about how I had survived, how I had rebuilt my life from nothing. "Tell me about Jessica's life since that day," I said, curious to see how much they knew about the aftermath of their decision. My mother seemed relieved at the question, perhaps thinking I was showing interest in reconciliation. She launched into a detailed account of how Jessica had dropped out of college after a semester, developed problems with alcohol and pills, and cycled through dead-end jobs and bad relationships. "She never really found her footing," my father added. "Not like you apparently have." He gestured vaguely at my appearance, the first acknowledgement that I had succeeded despite their abandonment. "We need to put this behind us for the sake of family harmony," my mother said, revealing their true agenda. "These things happen in families, and we learn from them. Sometimes there are lessons on all sides," my father added, with the patronizing tone I remembered from childhood lectures. The audacity of their request began to fully register. They wanted me to absolve Jessica of her guilt, to pretend that a simple sorry could erase the homelessness, the lost education, the years of therapy, the complete destruction of the life I had been building. With a calmness that surprised even me, I began to ask them questions about their actions that day and in the weeks that followed. Had they ever gone to look for me? Had they contacted the university when my scholarship was revoked? Had they told the family the truth when Jessica confessed? Or were they still protecting her reputation at my expense? Their answers revealed exactly what I expected. They had done nothing to find me, assuming I had landed on my feet or gotten help from friends. They had not reached out to the university or attempted to clear my name. They had told family members about Jessica's confession only as needed to facilitate finding me. My father grew defensive as my questioning continued, his face reddening in the way I remembered from childhood confrontations. "We did the best we could with the information we had," he insisted. "You have always had a flair for the dramatic. I am sure things were not as dire as you are making them sound." "Not as dire," I echoed, feeling a calm clarity I had never experienced in their presence before. "Let me tell you exactly how not dire things were." I described in detail the 3 nights in the library, the bridge where I contemplated suicide, the cockroach-infested room. I could barely afford the skin on my hands cracking and bleeding from chemical burns at the dishwashing job. I told them about the panic attacks, the nightmares that still occasionally woke me, screaming the years of therapy I had needed to trust anyone again. My mother attempted to gaslight me, a familiar tactic from childhood. "You always did exaggerate," she said, trying to smile through her discomfort. "I am sure it was difficult, but you seem to have done well for yourself despite it all." "Despite it all," I repeated softly. "Despite you, you mean?" My father tried a different approach. "We were protecting a young woman we believed had been victimized," he said, straightening his shoulders. "Any parent would have done the same. Any parent would have asked questions." I corrected him. Any parent would have listened to both sides. Any parent would have sought the truth rather than the easiest solution. I reached into my workout bag and pulled out a small notebook I carried for work ideas. On a clean page, I began writing numbers, while they watched in confused silence. 4 years of lost tuition at medical school, approximately $200,000. Lost wages as a doctor over 7 years, conservatively $1,400,000. Therapy costs $30,000. Emergency housing and food costs that first year $15,000. I continued listing every financial impact their decision had caused, totaling the figures at the bottom. "This is your bill," I said, sliding the paper across the table. "This is what your actions cost me in purely financial terms. The emotional cost is incalculable." They stared at the paper in stunned silence. Finally, my father found his voice. "You cannot possibly expect us to pay this," he said, pushing the paper back toward me. "I do not." I replied calmly. "I have already paid it myself, every penny of it. I just wanted you to see the magnitude of what you so casually dismiss as a miscommunication or lessons learned." My mother tried one last emotional appeal. "Will you at least meet with Jessica? She is prepared to apologize, and it would mean so much to her healing journey." The request crystallized everything wrong with their worldview. "No," I said firmly. "I will not meet with Jessica. Her healing is not my responsibility. My healing required moving on without any of you in my life, and I see no reason to change that now." "But we are family," my mother insisted, as if the word alone should override everything that had happened. "We were family." I corrected her. "You ended that relationship 7 years ago on our front lawn." My father's expression hardened. "You would deny your family over one mistake. What about forgiveness? What about your family legacy and inheritance?" I could not help but laugh at that. "My legacy is what I have built with my own 2 hands after you took everything else away. Keep your inheritance. I have already paid for it many times over." My mother began crying in earnest. Now, not the manipulative tears from earlier, but genuine sobs. "You have become cruel," she said between gasps. "This is not how we raised you." "You are right about that," I agreed. "This strength, this boundary, this self-respect, I learned all of it after you threw me away. They are the only gifts you ever gave me that had lasting value." I stood up, leaving my coffee untouched. "Do not contact me again. Do not send Jessica to apologize. I have rebuilt my life once, and I will not risk having any of you tear it down again." My father stood as well, his face, a mask of anger and wounded pride. "You will regret this stubbornness," he warned. "When you are older and alone, you will wish you had family." "I have family," I replied calmly. "They are the friends who stood by me when I had nothing, who believed in me when no one else did. Blood means nothing compared to that kind of loyalty." I walked away without looking back, feeling the weight of their stares, but no longer caring what they thought of me. For the first time since that day 7 years ago, I was truly free from their power over me. The moment they were out of sight, my legs began to shake so badly that I had to lean against a building for support. The confrontation had drained every ounce of emotional energy I possessed, leaving me physically weak but mentally clear. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and called Eliza, who had become my girlfriend of 2 years. "They found me," was all I needed to say. She knew immediately who they were from the fragments of my past I had shared with her. "I will be there in 15 minutes, she replied without hesitation. "Where are you?" Her immediate support brought tears to my eyes, tears I had not allowed my parents to see. By the time she arrived, I had managed to walk to a nearby park bench, still processing the surreal encounter. Eliza sat beside me, taking my hand in hers without speaking, allowing me the space to find my words. When I finally recounted the conversation, she listened without interruption, her grip on my hand tightening at certain points. "You stood your ground," she said when I finished. "I am so proud of you for that." The emotional aftermath continued for days. My therapist, Dr. Wells, cleared her schedule for an emergency session where we worked through the complex emotions the encounter had triggered. The nightmares returned briefly, vivid recreations of being thrown out mixed with new scenarios where my parents invaded the life I had built. This reaction is entirely normal, Dr. Wells assured me. Their appearance threatened the safety and stability you have created. Your body remembers the trauma, even if your mind has processed it. My friends rallied around me with protective care. Jamal, who had become both mentor and friend, invited me to dinner with his family, a silent reminder that I had people who valued me for who I truly was. My basketball group showed up at my apartment with beer and pizza, creating normal moments to ground me when everything felt unstable. A week after my parents' visit, a letter arrived with Jessica's name on the return address. I stared at it for a long time, feeling the weight of its potential contents. Finally, I returned it unopened, writing, "Return to sender no longer at this address" across the envelope. In a symbolic act of closure, I took my parents' contact information, which they had pressed into my hand before leaving the cafe, and burned it in a small metal trash can on my balcony. As I watched the paper curl and blacken in the flames, I felt the last tendrils of obligation release their hold on my heart. The weeks that followed brought a surprising sense of liberation. Having confronted my past directly and stood firm in my boundaries, I discovered a new level of peace I had not thought possible. The constant background fear that my parents might suddenly appear and disrupt everything diminished, replaced by confidence in my ability to protect the life I had built. This newfound freedom allowed me to reflect more deeply on who I had become and what truly mattered to me. I had survived the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged stronger, more compassionate, and more certain of my values. The validation I had once desperately sought from my parents now seemed insignificant compared to the self-validation I had earned through perseverance. "You know," I told Dr. Wells during one session, "I used to think healing meant no longer feeling pain when I thought about what they did. But now I understand it is about the pain no longer controlling my choices." She smiled at this insight. "That is exactly right. Healing is not the absence of scars, but learning to carry them without being defined by them." This perspective shifted how I approached all aspects of my life. In my work, I began focusing on projects that aligned with my personal ethics, rather than just those that promised the biggest bonuses. I volunteered at a youth shelter, working specifically with young adults who had been displaced from their homes due to family conflict. My relationship with Eliza deepened, as I allowed myself to be fully vulnerable with her, sharing the darkest moments of my past without fear of judgment. When she asked me to move in with her 6 months after my parents' visit, I said yes without the hesitation that would have plagued me before. "You know what I admire most about you," she said one night as we unpacked boxes in our shared apartment. "You never let what happened turn you bitter or cruel. You could have become just like them, but you chose a different path." Her observation led me to establish a small scholarship fund at a local community college, specifically for students who had lost family support. The Michael Ray Scholarship, named after the homeless veteran who had saved my life that night on the bridge, provided not just financial assistance but mentorship and housing resources. The most profound lesson I learned through this journey was that forgiveness is a personal choice, not an obligation. Society often pushes the narrative that forgiveness is necessary for healing, but I discovered that setting boundaries and moving forward without forgiveness can be equally valid and healthy. True family, I came to understand, is built on respect, trust, and unconditional support, not merely biological connection. The family I chose, the one composed of friends who stood by me at my lowest and celebrated my recovery, proved far more valuable than the one I was born into. The scars remain both visible and invisible. I still struggle with trust. At times, still have moments of insecurity that spring from that fundamental betrayal. But these wounds no longer define me or limit what I believe is possible in my life. They are simply part of the complex tapestry of experiences that made me who I am today. Have you ever had to cut ties with toxic family members? How did you rebuild your life afterward? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button so more people can find this story of survival and redemption. Subscribe for more real-life experiences, and share this with someone who might be struggling with family betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, sometimes The family you choose is more important than the family you are born into.